Prepare yourself to be blown away by the seismic sounds and scrutiny of AFTERSHOCKS Podcast with Chris Aiken and Matt Hartnett.
Shockwave Skullsessions and Shockwaves Radio presents our new podcast where we focus on the more extreme and obscure side of metal. It's called AFTERSHOCKS, and this is our very first episode of AFTERSHOCKS. And I got with me here my co-host, a very familiar name and voice to the Skullsessions listeners, book author and host of the Classic Metal Show, Chris Aiken. What's happening, Chris?
Hey, man. Glad to be doing this. This is going to be fun.
Sure will, man. Thanks for coming on. And, of course, our guest on the podcast today is owner and founder of the newest force on the global metal and hardcore map called Upstate Records, Mr. Mario Cangemi. Mario, man, great to finally talk to you, and thanks for coming on and being our first guest here on AFTERSHOCKS.
Hell yeah, that was quite the intro, and great pronunciation of my last name, man. You don't know how many times people butcher that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess my Italian buddies in New York would be upset with me if I didn't pronounce that correctly. So, I have my New York card taken from me if I did that. So
there you go. And it always sounds a little bit better when you raise your hand up in the air.
There you go.
True Italian.
Totally, man. Well, sure, man. Let's. Why don't we start by let's have you, Mario, give us a brief overview of your background in terms of metal and hardcore, and like really what eventually led you to the idea of starting Upstate Records.
Oh, right on. So, I use the term musician loosely, but I've been playing music really, from the early 80s, and, gateway bands or musicians, let's say, like Ozzy, really brought me into the metal scene. Of course, you got to, pay some homage to Kiss and everything. Mm-hmm. And then as, more heavier music started to come in, and I'm listening to, Metallica and Slayer, around the mid 80s is when in our local area, hardcore and maybe the influence from New York City really started to pop off really, really hard. And, in the Albany area, we had one hell of a scene, music wise, hardcore wise, and up here, metal dominated for a long time. So I think there was just a natural progression where you saw metal bands becoming more hardcore, or more of the hardcore bands become more metal-like. So very, very strong crossover type scene that was up here. So, when a couple of my friends showed me Corrosion of Conformity or Breakdown or Cro-Mags, that really just was speaking to me. Metal was always, I love the technical aspect from a musician standpoint, but lyrically, hardcore is where it was all about. I come up from a middle class, working class type family, and everything that hardcore was singing about really resonated with me. So over the years, I just found my lane, and just the sense of community, family, camaraderie that you found in the hardcore scene. Everybody was accepted. There was no, if you had long hair or short hair, it didn't really matter back then in regards to how you presented yourself style wise. So it was very, very accepting, and it felt like it was my home. Meanwhile, still continuing to play in bands in and out, and, fast forward, let's say to 2017, the band that I was in, I was really doing a lot for the band in regards to what I would call like label type work, and it was always a passion of mine to probably have a label. I did a lot with like studio work. So the behind the scenes or supporting bands, I think has always been in my DNA, and just never really found that kind of outlet. So with the band and getting all the aspects together, the CD duplication, social media type marketing, it just hit me one day, and I'm just thinking, gee, what would it be like to start a label? And my wife and I, we've always been very, very involved with music. We have a strong passion for music, and Kim does an incredible job with graphics. So one day I said, hey, what do you think about starting a label? And she looked at me with, that wife type look. You're like, you're fucking nuts, And we got 3 kids at home, and we were just like, how can we even make this work? And I told her, it's all about not compromising our family. We have 3 kids. They're very, very active in a lot of sports. So Kim has always been kind of like the calibrator in making sure that we don't affect our family life. And we agreed with all right, that first year in 2018, we'll only do 4 releases. This will be like a hobby type thing. And I think our passion for what we do just overtook everything. And it really grew really, really, really fast. I think an element for us is we always tried to stay humble and maintain that family atmosphere. And I think that's been, an attractive part. And having Kim and I in the same house gives us, I think, in some regards, a little bit of an advantage over maybe other people who are trying to do it independently, or maybe they have a team where they don't see each other all the time. Mm-hmm. So thankfully, Kim and I have a great relationship, and we're able to really feed off of each other's passion. And I think that's been really what's helped us grow this label. And sometimes I can't even believe how much it's grown. Like I said, we're very, very humble people. We're just very, very grateful, and having these type of opportunities with working with so many different artists is just, it blows my mind. I'm truly grateful.
Yeah. Oh, awesome, man. As you mentioned, these days it is extremely, strenuous and laborious for any independent label to stay above water, let alone thrive, just the way the current musical landscape is, especially here in the U.S. And like you said, you got to be nuts. I would say batshit crazy really is what you got to be, in a good way, of course, to start a new label in this day and age. And as you just said, you just kind of gave us a little bit of, what drove you to do the label. And, one of the things I did notice, and you just talked about too with Upstate, is the whole family philosophy that's incorporated really into your vision and the overall, implementation, how you really approach and work with, the bands and artists. I mean, I've heard a few podcasts with some of the artists on the roster, specifically, Eddie Sutton from Leeway, Dan Nastasi from Kings Never Die. Those 2 guys, very legendary names in the, tri-state hardcore realm, who are obviously still going strong today. And they both mention and really praise that philosophy of Upstate Records. And I think that's something that a lot of, independent labels, when they start out, they have that desire to incorporate that element, of family within their overall mission. But really when it comes to the reality and, actually working with really the monetary aspect too of owning and running a label, that philosophy a lot of times seems to kind of dissipate, very quickly. And it's really hard to maintain, due to the unfortunate rigors of the business in general of music. But I have to say, you've really done a phenomenal job in really staying true over your first, couple of years here as a label, with your vision, and it really shows in the way that the bands are talking about the label, which you don't see that often. I usually see the opposite, they're usually not talking very highly of record labels, so it seems like you're really doing a great job coming at it, like you mentioned earlier, from a musician's perspective, more so than a business person. How were you kind of able to balance those two? Because it is really probably arguably the toughest challenge that a label owner, faces upon entering the madness of the music industry. How do you really balance that out?
Yeah, Matt, you just touched upon a lot of really great points. If I were to, just recount some of the early conversations I've had with Eddie and Dan, and they spoke about their woes and their challenges that they had previously with dealing with the majors, and where they felt that they were maybe more or less just a cog on the wheel, and they didn't have that relationship. So a lot of that just fed into, our mission statement, so to speak. We don't want to be another label. We really just want to get behind and support our bands. So as far as, like managing the monetary aspects of it, it's hard, and you got to really forecast very, very cautiously and conservatively. Bands that come in with a really, really high expectation, we want, 10 color variants for vinyl, and we want, this marketing, and we want to get on tour. You just got to be frank with them and say, hey, this is what we have to work with. We're not a huge label. We don't have tremendous financial backing. So we're very, very cautious in making sure that we speak with the bands. We're very transparent. Hey, this is the budget we have for you guys. And for, the musicianship, the quality of the music obviously is dominating, but you really have to have the right kind of attitude to be part of the Upstate family. And I don't mean to say it so bluntly like that, but it's so there is an interview process somewhat. I gotta like you, and they gotta like us. And when you develop that trust between the band and the label, it's not really a band and a label anymore. It's really we talk about, it's a partnership. We want to work with bands that want to work hard, and they get it, and they get that financial. And what I always tell bands, if we work hard with this release, we're going to get to the situation where we're paying out. We're giving you what you're. But if we invest all that we have and we take a huge loss on something, it could be devastating to the label, and we just won't exist anymore. So balancing all that, being transparent, and working with bands that get it, I think has been one of our keys to success, allowing us to do what we do. We've pumped out a lot of releases. I'm not driving the Jaguar or Mercedes. I'm still financially probably the same spot where I was prior to the label, because everything that we make, we reinvest. But we reinvest very, very wisely, I think, and conservatively. Like this whole pandemic thing, we're not going to release anything right now because it just isn't going to. It just doesn't make sense. You could force it, but there's too much of a gamble right now with everything going on with the music scene.
Sure.
Mario, with working with these bands, with hardcore bands in general, do you find that they work harder than other styles of bands? Because I know for me, I know a ton of bands, and every band I've ever known, there's usually one guy that's a worker, and there's other guys that are looking to party or chicks or whatever. It seems like, from what I know, and I don't know a ton of hardcore bands. I love hardcore music, but I don't know a ton of the bands. But it does seem to me like from start to finish, the bands are a little more business centric than your pop metal bands or your death metal bands or what have you. Have you seen it that way, or am I completely wrong there?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think with hardcore bands, and it's kind of getting back to what I was saying about the attractiveness of hardcore, is I think genuine hardcore kids are playing music because it's an outlet for them. I think they're a little bit more grounded in regards to what is attainable. Let's face it, hardcore is huge now, but it's still not as big as something like metal. And with some of the metal bands that I've worked with, I think there's a much higher level of entitlement where the hand is out a lot more. Whereas the hardcore bands, they're working class. None of them are playing in a hardcore band thinking that they're going to be the next Agnostic Front. And even if you look at bands like Agnostic Front or Madball, they're the top hardcore bands out there, and they still have the hustle. You know what I mean? They're working very, very hard, and they're probably right on that fringe of being able to dedicate, or all their income is coming from music. That is very, very rare in the hardcore scene. So to your point, I think the hardcore bands are a lot more humble. They're more grounded. They have a harder, a bigger drive to get their music out there on their own. And that allows us just to come alongside them with that whole partnership mentality. And we're going to work together on this release. And they're not looking for the label to do all this stuff for them. Mm-hmm. So, I think there's a big difference between metal and hardcore bands.
Sure. And even a band that's a crossover, and probably arguably the biggest selling hardcore band right now would be a band like Hatebreed. And certainly, and obviously Hatebreed is somewhat metal and somewhat hardcore. But if you look at Jamie Josta as an example, who is definitely a hardcore guy, what does he do? When he's not on the road and when he's not recording, he's recording with other people, or he's built himself up a successful podcast. It's much like we're talking about here. These guys that have grown up in this, blue collar mentality, they're always striving to work. They're always striving to do more. And it really goes back to what you said at the beginning about it being a family. Hardcore in general, at least in my eyes, is a family type of a music, and it's weird because a lot of people come into hardcore at different times. I'll tell my own story. I came in kind of in the middle of it. First hardcore band I ever really heard was Biohazard, and from Biohazard I grew into, Earth Crisis and Hatebreed. And then I went backwards, and then I found my agnostic fronts, and I found Madball and Blood for Blood and stuff like that. And I really grew to love all that stuff. But it's a weird thing when you talk to other people that are big time fans of hardcore. They all know the history, meaning that no matter where you come in with hardcore, and this is very unlike every other genre, wherever you come in with hardcore, you almost always go and find the history and appreciate all of it. It's not like you come in and that's where you are, where if go ahead.
Yeah, great point, Chris.
I was just going to agree to everything you said. And, Jamie Jossa, hats off to that guy, man. They used to come up here to Albany and play, when they were just, starting out. And I can remember watching the evolution and how big they grew. But he even today, he's a hustler, man. Yeah. He hustles. He makes it happen. So, and a lot of people, I think, dog on him a little bit because he hustles so much. It's probably maybe a little bit of the jealousy element.
Yeah, he's been so successful. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. And I hate, it bothers me. Why are you hating on somebody's success like that? Hats off. Mm-hmm. And so much of what he represents is, helping out other people. He's helped out our label, Mm-hmm. So he is an approachable guy, and I get it. Hardcore really isn't represented by money, and it's taboo. Once you start talking about money in hardcore, that really it's not what it's about. Mm-hmm. But however, it's that green that is the grease on the wheels, and hardcore bands get it, and they understand. But once you get to that level of success, it's like you're almost cast out of that hardcore family because now you're too successful. You've made too much money. There's no way that you can stay true to the hardcore scene if you're making money. Mm-hmm. However you value or you gauge success, it's all a little bit different. But as you start to climb the ranks, like a Hatebreed and Jamie and what he's doing, money's going to be coming along.
Sure.
But he does a lot to reinvest and also, I think, to give back to the scene and the community as well.
Yeah. Let me tell you a real quick story about Jamie, which is all you need to know about him. I used to do a radio show on WMMS, which is the big commercial station here in Cleveland, the big rock station. And we brought in Hatebreed we used to do these sessions where we would bring bands in and we'd invite like 10 or 15 fans. And it was, you've seen this in every city. You do a little sound check and, then the band will sign a couple autographs, take a couple pictures, whatever, So we brought Hatebreed in to do this. Hatebreed, it was at 3:00 in the afternoon. Hatebreed comes out. There's honestly 10 people in front of them. They played like they were playing in front of the crowd they were going to play in front of that night. I mean, it was not sound check. It was them bringing it as hard as they could. And then after about, I think it was like 5 songs, they were only supposed to play 3. The sound guy and the venue guy said, nope, cut it. You know, that's all they get. You know, we got to get ready for the show. So Josta climbs down to where all the fans are just gathered right in front. And he says, stay right here. I'll be right back. He goes on the bus. He and the band bring back a cooler of beer, put it on the floor, and give the beer to everybody that's there. It's like, okay, you know,
nice.
have some drinks. And then they hung out. They hung out literally until doors with the 10 fans that were there. They hung out until doors, like an hour and a half, 2 hours later, just hanging out and shooting the shit. And I didn't know Hatebreed from anybody back then. I mean, I knew their music, but I didn't know these guys. And ever since then, I've had this appreciation. I'll support Jamie and Hatebreed with whatever they do, even if I don't like what they're doing, because it's that kind of caring that he exhibited. And since that point, I've obviously interviewed a ton of hardcore bands, and they're all like that. You know, that every big, small, doesn't matter. I mean, I've interviewed Roger from Agnostic Front 10 times. And every single time I run into Roger, he still remembers my name. And it's like, dude, you run into 10 million people a year and you remember one guy's name in a city that's not even an A city for you. It's that kind of care that hardcore bands have always seemed to have for their fans and for their music that separates it, in my eyes, from any other style of quote unquote metallic music.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's very intimate. I mean, it's always been a very intimate scene, the hardcore scene. And, you know, as you guys were saying, very blue collar. So, like you mentioned, it just has that, the family aspect to it. And I think, and speaking about Jamie Jost, like you said, I mean, if you really look what he's done for hardcore, I mean, it's amazing how he really, he definitely brought it, I guess, a bit above the underground into more of the mainstream, especially in the 2000s. When, Hatebreed was part of that, that whole new wave of American, heavy metal scene. We just did Chris just did, a podcast with the guys from Chimera. They were with that whole scene, and, but I think he got like a lot of shit for maybe, like you said, taking it out of the underground, bringing it a bit above, above ground. But at the same time, like you said, Mary, he's always contributed back to the hardcore scene. He's never just, gotten out of it and been like, okay, I'm over that scene. And, some bands kind of did that. I mean, a band like, Biohazard, when they started out obviously deep into the hardcore scene, once they got signed to a major label, they sort of kind of went away a little bit from the hardcore scene, more towards the metal scene, and just kind of stayed there for a while. But, I want to move on. Just one thing I've noticed too about Upstate, Mario and you guys, is you really are giving the youth a chance and an outlet to kind of make a name for themselves. I mean, you've continued one of the best traditions, I think, in hardcore metal over the years, which is the compilation release. That's something that was always a staple of just about every underground metal and hardcore label that was out there, especially in the 80s and 90s. And, it's kind of seemed to tail off a little bit over the last 15 years or so. I mean, but by doing that, you're definitely giving them a much needed exposure to continue to push metal and hardcore forward, because, most independent labels prefer to really be in that safe zone, quote unquote safe zone, and work with artists who have had some past success already, and made a name for themselves already. I mean, me, personally, when I did my label, I'm guilty of that as well. When I started, I mean, pretty much all the bands I had on my label were comprised of artists that had been in the scene for some time, or had some past success. And I think it's so important and admirable that you are giving these younger bands a chance, because bands do need time to grow and develop musically. I mean, that's something that has been sorely lacking, I believe, for years now in the music industry as a whole, which is why I think you don't hear a lot of originality sometimes in many of the more modern bands. Artist development in general has just completely been scrapped, as labels just don't have the monetary means, to develop artists like they used to. I mean, newer bands are forced to be successful right off the bat, or else they become, relevant very quickly. And so, I mean, what do you look for when you're signing newer acts to your label? What are some of the crucial, factors that you want to see before you decide taking that risk to invest in them?
Well, there isn't a whole lot of rocket science. I'm not going to sit back and say, I go to, Spotify, I look how many followers or plays or YouTube or Facebook. I mean, there is some scanning, but a lot of it is just that gut feel, to be honest with you. So either I'll approach a band or a band will approach me or a friend of a friend, with the roster that we have. We have a lot of feelers out there, and just to bring up the compilations again, you're networking with a lot of bands, and right there, you get some intelligence, if you will, about bands that, maybe are a good fit. But one of the first things we always do is obviously, we look at we listen to their music. I like to look at their YouTube videos, see what they look like. I like to look at their flyers. Where are they positioning, if you will, on shows? How often are they playing out? So those are some insights. But it really gets down to jumping on the phone, and if there's some magic on that phone, like when we're talking together, we're strategizing. I can tell pretty quickly if they're authentic. If their heart is really into it. Or they're going to be a problem child, so to speak. Right. Where they always it's going to be a one-way partnership, meaning that they're constantly having their hand out saying, "Give me, give me, give me." You can pick that up pretty quickly when you're on the phone. But I would say, that's the most important part, quite honestly. You got to have great music. But we got to like you, and you got to like us. If we feel that we can generate that trust element, and you're going to work hard, because I always tell the bands, the harder you work, the harder we are going to work, because that demonstrates to me that you really want to make this happen. And I wouldn't say it's a competitive thing, but I don't want to let you down. So much of the bands that come on, I tell them, we're very customer service oriented. I want to make you guys happy. So if you guys are working really, really hard, we're going to come along as almost like another member of the band. And all we're trying to do is do some of this heavy lifting so that you guys can focus in on your music. And to date, I think that strategy has really worked out. In the beginning, I wasn't maybe so concerned about bands and how often they played out. But now it's definitely a critical factor.
Sure.
What I've come to realize is we can work really, really hard right up into a street date. When they go to drop their release, we can do a lot of good stuff there. But if you can't carry the torch thereafter, or you don't have the ability to carry the torch after the release, really don't come to me and say, "Hey, how are our sales?" Well, at that point, that's really on you. That you really got to carry it from there. So bands that have the ability to jump on tours, or even 3-4 day weekend runs, is very, very valuable.
Sure.
In fact, I probably encourage that more than a 2-week tour, because when you're playing in South Dakota on a Tuesday night, let's face it, more than likely it's going to be a bomb in a bad way. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So yeah, those are some of the aspects we're looking for. There's no magic formula. It's not rocket science. It's just a lot of it's based upon that gut feel.
When you say that the music's got to be great, what do you look specifically for something that reminds you of somebody that you consider to be great, or somebody that doesn't sound like anything that you've heard before, or a little of both?
Oh, I'm a crossover guy. I love, it's like chocolate and peanut butter. You bring me metal infused hardcore, you got some good technical capabilities with your music. You throw in some head bob breakdowns type stuff, and I'm going to be all about it. We're going to put out what we like. I got to like the music. We've had some submissions where the music is just phenomenal, and we're looking at it and it's like, wow, this could be really big, but it's not my style. And I think that would compromise the integrity of the label and what we stand for. we have a lane, and it's not about dollar signs for us in some regards. We're not going to lock onto some band because they may be the next biggest hype band. I'll leave that for the other labels. For me, it's got to be driving, big breakdown, good music, obviously no racist shit whatsoever. That's not what we stand for, So there is a certain lane, and I think that lane is pretty wide. I think there is some diversity with our roster, but they all have a lot of common elements. You take a Kings Never Die, which is almost like a hardcore rock and roll type band. It's very, very catchy. And then you talk about, Departed, which is, almost like a black metal hardcore band, or Gloves Off, which is very metallic-y hardcore. But they all have a lot of commonality with all of them. And I don't think we're really watering down the label. We're going to put out what we like.
Sure. Well, let's talk about, some of the bands on the label. I mean, you've got a handful of veterans on the roster, as I mentioned earlier. One of the biggest, obviously, being Eddie and Leeway. And, it's great to see Eddie back in action, playing those classic Leeway songs. I mean, I saw him about 2 years ago out here in Oakland when they were out here, and he had that backup band, Rhythm of Fear. It was a great band, and they did just a flawlessly job playing those songs. And, he was great. And, obviously, he's a very underrated frontman, I believe, and vocalist in his time. And, of course, he released a couple of songs with Dan DeStasi, and hoping we're going to hopefully get some more of that in the future. Is there anything you could tell us about what's going on with Eddie right now and what Leeway's up to?
Yeah, Eddie's got his eyes on the future for sure. There is some talk about doing some reissues, because Eddie, with the past, let's say, there are some challenges that he faced.
Sure.
And, there's a lot of legal stuff in regards to the releases. And that's why you don't see any of the, you don't see Desperate Measures or Born to Expire up on Spotify.
Yeah, I noticed that. Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a shame.
Sure.
Those are, Born to Expire is in my top 5 of all time. And people need to hear that. That needs to be available. So that is being talked about, jumping back into the studio and reissuing. Eddie is, very anxious to get back out on the road and play some shows. That's where he really, thrives. He's probably one of the best frontmen I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what he's got in the works right now. With all the even the studios are shut down, so nobody's really doing a whole lot unless you have your home recording studio.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is a little bit on pause, even from the Leeway camp at this moment.
Okay. And the other band I want to talk about is Sub-Zero. You guys are doing some work with Lou and Sub-Zero, who, in my opinion, one of the most underrated, New York hardcore bands probably ever. I mean, that Happiness Without Peace is a top 10 all-time favorite of mine. I mean, it was such a good record. I mean, they even got picked up by Century Media back in the late 90s, that album. It was so good.
Yep.
So what's coming up with those guys? What are they? What's Lou and Sub-Zero up to? What's the future holding with them?
So they're about halfway, right before, let's say the country went into lockdown. They're about 3-4 songs in for their new recording, Beauty and Sorrow.
Okay.
But then obviously everything got shut down and put on pause. They had about 17, 18 dates booked in Europe, which was going to be their 30th anniversary tour. All those tour dates got canceled. So we've been trading emails with the promoters, MAD Booking in Europe. So it looks like that's going to get rescheduled for later on this year. Everybody's just really kind of waiting and seeing what's going to happen. But as soon as, some of this lockdown gets lifted, they're going to jump back into the studio, and they have a 5-6 song EP that is going to drop here. As soon as I know, you will know.
Awesome.
So I'm really excited. I got to tell you, when you get those emails from Lou, from Sub-Zero, is hey, we're we're shopping around. We're interested in Upstate. You want to talk about a happy day, man. Holy shit. Once again, it just blows your mind. Like they even know who we are. It's crazy, but it's cool.
Oh, awesome.
Have you found, Mario, that one of the advantages that you have putting out a label that focuses on this kind of music now has been that a lot of the labels that were focused on it in the last 15, 20 years have started either mostly changing direction more than just disappearing. Like I'll point to Victory just as a label. Victory used to put out a ton of this stuff back, 10, 15 years ago, and now I don't even know what they're doing now, emo pop or something. They're not doing this kind of music anymore, and I don't see anything from Century Media really, except for the super established bands coming out, focused on this. Does that opening leave a window for you to, kind of swoop in and grab that piece of the pie that kind of was left untouched?
Yeah, it's quite possible. I never really look at it that way, because even as we were starting, there's a lot of labels, and we work with other labels as well, from a distro's perspective. We trade, and it's how we can support each other in regards to the releases. With the change in direction by Victory, let's say, yeah, absolutely. It opens up the door for other bands to look at Upstate as a potential outlet for their material. We didn't purposely jump in and say, oh, wow, Victory is doing something else, and we can take advantage of that. I think maybe as we continue to grow, and I hope that our bands are very happy with us, and that makes us a little bit more attractive to other bands, that we can continue to stay in this lane. The one thing when I wake up in the morning that I'm fearful of is that we start changing our focus, or we lose sight of why we started, the label. And, we talked about family, but the other part is, we want to be about music discovery, and we want to have fun with it. So as you start to grow, the temptation to change directions because you're chasing, let's say, money and try to, get a big payday with some of these bands, I think that can really affect your integrity, or affect your initial mission statement as to why you got into this to begin with. So we're constantly checking ourselves, and I'm happy in the lane that we're in. I'm happy where we are. Obviously, I want to continue to grow the label, but still, it's not about money. As long as we're getting enough money to reinvest, and we're not losing our shirts on stuff, we'll be here. We'll definitely be here. I got a good paying day job. So the label, in my opinion, is for us to give back, so to speak, in regards to that music discovery, and help bands get out there, get their name out there. Originally, we were always talking about, Upstate being that stepping stone. And if our bands get picked up by a bigger label, then we won. We're happy with that kind of situation. Obviously, I hope we grow into that next step as well. Just so we can support our bands in like a bigger way if possible.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you guys definitely, I think, Chris brought up a great point that I think, there is sort of I don't want to say a vacuum, but there is a window for a lot of the veteran bands that, because, look at the label-wise, hardcore in terms of the United States. I mean, off the top of my head, obviously, you guys are really really taken off. And I think other than, Upstate, I would say probably the only other label that is, around the same, I would say, as big as you guys are, is probably like Bridge 9. I mean, they're obviously a big one out of Boston that's been around for a while. But in terms of newer bands and music, like I said, I think that's one of the one of the areas you guys are really going to flourish in. I mean, you know, I was mentioning earlier, like I said, about the work you're doing with a lot of those newer bands. And I did notice a couple of really cool bands coming out of Detroit, Smash Your Enemies, which really stood out to me, and Anti-Up. Those are two really, really good bands. And it looks like Detroit, I mean, which has always been really, I think Cleveland, with Cleveland bands like Integrity, Ringworm, I mean, you can go down the list. Those are some of the most underrated hardcore spots, I think, in the country that don't get the credit they deserve. Detroit, Detroit's right there, too. I mean, Detroit really, you know, is where the traditional sort of New York hardcore sound sort of originated from with Negative Approach. I mean, and Knoxville Front has, you know, documented it pretty well that they were very heavily influenced by them. And, you know, a ton of great bands continue to come out of that area of the country. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing across the, you know, not even necessarily just across the country, but across the globe in terms of some of the areas where you see a lot of this hardcore really flourishing or continuing to, you know, have a stronghold in the scene.
Yeah. You know, when I look, you know, across the U.S. Or the hardcore scene for that matter in the U.S., I think there's a lot of variation, a lot of ebbs and flows. You know, I've seen, you know, very high points in hardcore and very low points in hardcore. You know, I don't know what the hell goes on in Detroit, but they produce some of the most brutal freaking music I've ever heard. You know, Smash Your Enemies and Anti-Up. But there's a ton of other bands coming out of Detroit that are just brutal, you know. I'm seeing a lot out of the West Coast. The one band that we brought on just recently, Arcline, I always talk to them. They have a very strong New York hardcore influence, but a West Coast vibe. I think there is a lot of differences between, you know, East Coast, West Coast hardcore. But I think they do a nice job, you know, maintaining of that New York style. But the one thing, you know, is very, very interesting to me is, you know, when we work with European labels or even European bands for that matter, there are a lot of great hardcore bands coming out of Europe. And I don't know if the U.S. is just so saturated, but it seems to be not as embraced as it could be. You know, there are some really powerful bands that I think if their hometown was in somewhere in the United States, they'd be huge. You know, Cold Stare is one that really jumps out at me. You know, phenomenal traditional type hardcore band, but they're not I don't know if it's because of the logistics of them coming over to the U.S., but if you guys see the tours, you know, Europe pops off with some amazing tours. Oh yeah. And you know, I've even talked with some of the booking agents over there and say, hey, why don't you bring that tour here to the U.S.? And it's just the logistics of it. It just would never work. I think the U.S. is just too big for that to happen. So, you know, to answer your question, where do I see, you know, a hot area across the globe? I think there's just an overall surgence of hardcore right now. I think it's just being embraced worldwide. And yeah, I'm seeing that with, you know, physical sales. I think, you know, the kids are coming back. They want vinyl. They want CDs. They want tapes. I think we're on the breaking of another major, I don't want to say outbreak of hardcore, just globally. And then obviously with social media and being able to share your music, it's a beautiful time for hardcore music in general.
Do you think that a lot of the reason that it is exploding again or having this new uprising of hardcore is because globally, I think you can look globally and forget the music just for a second. You can look anywhere on the globe and you see people that are frustrated with the situation, whether it's financial or political or whatever. And those are kind of core elements of what hardcore music has always been about in the first place is, you know, the big fuck you to the man, more or less. It's, you know, it's always been like that. And we kind of got comfortable for a while. And now all of a sudden here in the last 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, you know, people have gotten frustrated again and angry again. And I think personally, I'm thinking a lot of that anger has led young 20-somethings into picking up their instruments and playing the most abrasive kind of music to share their point. Because in very much the same way there is a big blast of hardcore coming out, there's also a resurgence of old school thrash metal coming out. And that music is based on the exact same oppression or anger that, the two are almost symbiotic with everything but their style. And I wonder if you think that might be a reason that there's so much more music globally coming out in this style.
Yeah, I think, when you're growing up as a male, say, and you're full of testosterone, you got to let that stuff out. And
right.
There's always been somewhat of an outlet, I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm thinking of, you go back 10 years or so or maybe 15 years ago when hip hop was like really big.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden hip hop became really, really watered down,
Mm-hmm.
or so that lane for hip hop, I think, is really drying up in some regards. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a good thing. So now more kids are picking up an instrument again.
Sure.
Instead of trying to get behind a microphone, now they're actually picking up a guitar, and they're finding that hardcore and thrash is a viable outlet to get a lot of this aggression out. And I'm glad, and
sure.
I'm happy as shit that, kids are going back and they're starting to respect more of the older bands as well. I mean, if we may just take a little bit of a turn, look at what Death Angel is doing these days, or obviously before this pandemic. I mean, you haven't heard the name Death Angel in quite some time, and I think they were nominated for a Grammy recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think it is a sign of the times that, one, we got to get a lot of shit out, and kids are getting their shit out by getting into hardcore and metal again. And obviously we're fueled with a lot of stuff that's going on politically, socially. We got to get this stuff out in a positive manner, or all hell's going to break loose.
Sure. Yeah. And yeah, just one other band I wanted to bring up to you, Mario, obviously, and I have to do this, obviously, because we both worked with this band. And they just, when you talked about the band Arcline on your roster now, and a band that incorporates the New York hardcore sound with the LA hardcore blend, and I think nobody does that better than the band Count Time. Obviously, like I said, we both worked with them. I released their first record. I think they're one of the best bands that I've ever heard that incorporates the New York hardcore sound while also blending in that LA sound without it being forced, and obviously, Junior, he's like the Freddie, Creation, Freddie Madball of the LA hardcore scene. He's the OG. He's been out in the underground LA hardcore scene for decades. And, along with Mikey on guitar there, those two are really just a major force in hardcore. And, I just saw that they were on the Persistence tour in Europe. They got to play, Agnostic Front, Gorilla Biscuits, Billy from Biohazard, Wisdom and Chains. What a great tour that is. Anything we can expect from them? I know they had just finished up recording with Billy from Biohazard. Are you going to be working with those guys in the future as well?
Matt, I hope so. They did record with Billy, and just before this pandemic, there were some conversations that were starting. And now with this whole pandemic and everything being locked down,
sure, everything's
everything is really up in the air. I hope we get the opportunity to work with them and release it. I absolutely love that band, Junior and Mikey. They're great dudes. It'd be an honor to be able to release their stuff. So once again, that's another one that's on pause as far as I know. But I hope to be able to come back and make some social media posts, let's say, and saying that we have a release date for Count Time.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, so in your opinion, what's your hypothesis with what's going to happen? I mean, I know right now things are very uncertain, obviously, with what's going on. It's really impossible to kind of be able to predict what the future holds, especially in terms of live music. And I just wanted to get your take. I mean, since you're on the front lines, in the industry, and just to, basically to maintain an optimistic outlook on things. I mean, there's no point in really trying to be cynical, regardless of all the challenges that are going to occur. Do you see any sort of silver lining as of right now? I know it's still pretty early. It's only been about a month now. So, I mean, do you see any kind of silver lining or something that positive that's going to come out of this that you can kind of maybe predict, or you just feel in your gut that's going to happen?
Yeah, I think, there always is. Everything happens for a reason. And how you interpret that, is really a personal choice. You could look at this as being completely devastating, or you could be looking at it as the biggest opportunity in the world. And that's the way we look at it. I mean, there's a lot of things that Kim and I are working on right now that's going to prepare us for when things open up again. And then the silver lining, I think, for bands, if they choose to do so, is for them to actually reflect and take advantage of this time. Even practicing your instrument more than you have in the past. You can take advantage, but also as a band, reflect and say, geez, what can we do creatively? It's forcing a lot of people to think outside the box on how to stay relevant. And these are the great opportunities that, how to think outside the box and stay relevant can carry over into when this lockdown gets lifted, because now you have more tools in the tool chest on how to maintain your relationships with your fans, and how you can take your friends and turn them into fans, or take your fans and turn them into friends. I'm seeing a lot of great stuff that bands are doing, staying connected. And then once they get out of this, because they've made such a strong connection, when they go to play a show, I'm anticipating that more people are going to be coming out and be able to support them. So it's really, that silver lining is how you perceive it. If you're putting the work in now, it's going to pay off. But if you're in the position where you're saying, woe is me, I can't play a show and I can't get to the studio, well, once this gets lifted, that gate's going to pop up, and there's going to be a whole flood of music coming out. And if you're not prepared to jump in the front of the pack, you're going to get lost really, really quick.
Right now is one of those times too. I've been saying this to every band that I've interviewed in the last few weeks, regardless of style. You've got everybody as a captive audience now. Everybody's sitting at home begging for something to do. If you're in a band right now and your band has a Facebook, a Twitter, a Instagram, a TikTok, whatever it is, and you're not posting something every single day, especially a young band that's not well known, if they're not posting a YouTube video or something every day, they're wasting an opportunity. I know for me personally, just as a host of a radio show, I post a lot of stuff on our Facebook page, like, hey, here's something I'm listening to today. And a lot, I very rarely post old stuff. I'm not going to be posting, Countdown to Extinction Megadeth very often.
Sure.
Instead, I'm posting something new and fresh, like different style of music, obviously, but I'm really hot on this band Sorcerer out of Sweden. And they play kind of like doom metal. And I've been posting that. And just as a host of a show, not even a band guy, I've got people hit me up. When's this album coming out? How do I get it? Who's the label? Where do I buy it? I've got people sharing it with other people and whatnot. And again, that's just as, guy that's barely a step above being a fan. An actual band should be using that to spread their music around. Put out a post with a link to a video, on YouTube, or a song on Spotify or whatever, and right at the end of it, please share. That's it. Just write please share at the end. And band guys would be amazed at how much they will grow their audience right now, where you have, here in the U.S., you have 300 million people sitting at home looking for anything to do, looking for anything to entertain them.
You're absolutely correct, man. And even, I personally, I know times are tough out there. There's a lot of people out of work. So we do a lot of social blasting, whether it's, hey, buy this album, or this one's for sale, we're doing this pre-order. So just to be respectful of the situation, we're just sharing music. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're not asking you. We don't want you to buy anything right now. Let's be honest. You know, I want you to take care of your family, and I really mean that. You know, but we can still share music. You know, it does, unless you don't have to buy music to listen to it. So even if bands are just sharing each other's music, now you're networking yourself with other bands, and you're just growing that community. You know, one thing that we're doing, or I've been doing a lot, is we'll do a Spotify playlist. So I'll ask, you know, an artist on our label or even a friend, be like, hey, give me 20 tracks, of your favorite tracks. And we'll post that out, and we'll do a little interview to go along with it. And people love it. You know, it's just try to be creative to stay relevant, but also promote music without being obnoxious and say, buy this stuff. There's lots of things that you can do. Lots of things.
Yeah. No, definitely. Like you said, I mean, take advantage of the situation. I mean, like you said, this is a great time to network, to listen to more music. Like you said, pick up your instrument, you know, more often and just get better at it. I mean, there are, like I said, a lot of positives in this, at least to look at it that way. You could find a lot of, you know, pros instead of all the cons when dealing with this, you know, pandemic and the whole situation that's going on. And, yeah, no, that's great. I have noticed, man, online, you know, you definitely, when you guys, the way you work your social media, I think is just fantastic. I mean, I also love how even, you know, speaking about buying, I mean, I know like you said, you're not necessarily wanting people to buy any of your products right now, but you do offer some great opportunities to get some great music with some great deals. You have, I noticed you do the bundling with, you know, you could pick, you know, 5 CDs or whatever it is, and you know, mix and match them. I mean, you offer definitely a array of different avenues to where people can get music, whether it's buying it or not buying it. You know, which I think it's really a great way of promoting the bands and your label together. I think it's fantastic.
Well, I really appreciate that, Matt. I mean, I can't tell you how much I do appreciate it, because, you know, we see things going out one way, going out to social media and all that, and I have no idea how it's being perceived. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So when we get feedback like that, that just, you know, puts a smile on my face. And, you know, we really want to provide a good product, good services, good prices, good opportunities for the people that support us and buy our music. So we really try to do the best we can and make things either affordable or attractive or fun. You know, make your own bundle type of thing. Yeah, we're all about it. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's great. And yeah, so I mean, we're getting close to about an hour here, so we'll probably get ready to wrap it up. But Chris, did you have anything else you want to bring up?
No, I just, the only other thing I wanted to, since we talked about bands that have been established, I want to bring up, I didn't know a whole lot about Upstate, I'll be honest, you know, up until Matt asked me about doing this. And then I looked, like, you know, like anybody would, I looked it up and I listened to comps 2 and 3 that were on Google Play, and there's a lot of great music on that. But then I got turned on to what I think is your latest release, the Gloves Off release. What a killer band that is. Yeah. I know you touched on them briefly, but goddamn, that's a great band, dude.
Nice. Well, shout out to Cody Clark. You know, he's the lead singer. It'll make him really, really happy. He's, you know, him and the boys are really proud of their music, and they're taking advantage of this time, and they're working on some new material coming out. And they're just, once again, a great band, great bunch of dudes. You know, very, very humble. They're just a perfect match for us. I love their music. It's heavy, it's brutal, good stuff. So I'll be sure to let him know that, you know, he gained a new fan, let's say.
Absolutely, you did.
Nice, man. All right, Mario, why don't you go ahead, man, just give the listeners your, I guess, all your social media information, or how they can get in touch with you, or you know, just whatever you want to plug out there for the label and for yourself.
Awesome. Well, I want to plug my wife and thank her and Kim and everything she's doing first and foremost. But yeah, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I think it's pretty straightforward. Upstate Records. We have our own website, upstaterecordsny.com. You got to put the NY in there at the end. And we also have a Merch Now store. That's where the majority of our merchandise or apparel, streetwear that you can grab, and that's upstaterecords.merchnow.com.
Awesome.
And, we have our Bandcamp site has all of our digitals available as well.
Awesome, man. Well, awesome, man. Well, thanks, Mario, man. It's been great talking to you, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and good luck with everything. I hope everything settles in sooner rather than later, and we hear some more new great releases out on Upstate Records.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Matt and Chris. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you all the best. Stay healthy and safe, fellas.
All right, you too, man. Thanks, guys.
Be good. Take care.
All right, take it easy. Thanks for listening to Aftershocks. For more episodes, go to our website at www.aftershockspodcast.com. Visit us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for more news and information on the podcast. And be sure to subscribe, listen to, and review all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms. For your music listening pleasure, visit our website or go to www.shockwavesradio.com. For all comments and questions, please email us at info@aftershockspodcast.com.